Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Rancher and Stilettos Presents Cocktails and Conversations. So glad you guys could tune in. And the guest that I have today is a really great friend, such a sweetheart. I want you guys to meet Dr. Summer Allen. Hello, Dr. Summer. How are you?
Wonderful. So excited to be here. Hello, everyone.
Yes, I'm so glad that you were able to join me today. And you know what? We got to do a cheer. We just have to do our first cheer of the day. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers. Well, I wanted to bring you on as a fellow author to talk about your book. Please, please, please share with us. Your book is called Lose the Debate. Can you just give us a little bit of background about it?
Absolutely. Lose Debate, it was a passion project of mine that really kind of came about during the pandemic, around the George Floyd era. My background is in organizational development, and I also do executive coaching. And during that time, especially in organizational spaces and even, in our private lives, there were a lot of things that as a society we wanted to have really important and bold conversations about. And so oftentimes we hear the phrase courageous conversations.
Well,
Um,
and to your point, that resonates with me because we used to work together, full
yep,
disclosure. And I can remember those words coming at me about courageous
yep,
conversations. And, I'm just like, well, if they're not going to do their job, I'll just like do it myself. And your feedback was you got to stick up for yourself and make sure that these people that you've hired are following through. And that is the way that I basically was able to grow from encouragement from you. So thank you for that.
absolutely. Thank you. And I think that's one of the things I noticed about us as adults and humans. It's really hard to say the things that need to be said. And so the book was about, big social issues and having courageous conversations. But like you said, it's also about if I'm a leader, how do I give the proper feedback or how do I set the right boundaries with my staff or with my leadership? Or even if I'm in a family and relationships, how do I do those exact same things? And so the book is about Lose the Debate. And it really is about a mindset shift that
Mm-hmm.
each and every one of us could really implement to not go into these situations thinking it's a war or it's going to be conflict, but more of it is just a necessary dialogue. It is words that just need to be had.
And don't you see it as a muscle? The more we do it, the better we get at it.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
and you mentioned how, and we were both talking about work environment, personal interactions as well. So a lot of the women who share my story and the Ranch and Stilettos books, it really resonates with them relationships with folks of the opposite sex, our husbands, our boyfriends, what have you. Can you repurpose or use this book for those type of conversations as well? Because I think at this point in life, we all know that those type of conversations need to happen. But like you said, it's the fear of what if they don't like what I say.
Absolutely. And the book was dual kind of therapy for me. It was societal. It was actually kind of a trifecta. It was societal, it was work, but it was
Mm-hmm.
also relational. In that
Mm-hmm.
moment, we were in lockdown, remember? So
Exactly.
you're at home with your person all the time
Right.
and trying to navigate that. A lot of the content, and you'll see a lot of examples in the book that really touch on intimate and personal relationships in our lives. And so, like you said, there are many more dynamics when it comes to play in an interpersonal and an intimate relationship. A lot of it goes back to our childhood. Like if we have a fear of rejection in any kind of way, being
Right.
able to use our voice and hold the other person accountable, it's going to be much more difficult. And what that book does is it allows you to have a framework and some real tools and strategies to be able to, like you said, build the muscle, A, first,
Mm-hmm.
if we don't have it, and then to find a safe space to continue to use the muscle so that it becomes a part of our normal behavior.
One of the things I really appreciate is how it works in conjunction with my journaling. So
Hmm.
as I have, issues that come up and I've read the book and just find it to be just such a great structure around the next step is, especially when, I'm still growing too. And I I would say over the years at this point in life, probably the thing I do better than I used to do is hold myself accountable.
Yeah.
Look at myself in the mirror and say, did you was this was an opportunity to stand up for yourself, and perhaps I didn't do that. So as I'm journaling, what I find is I make those notes to say not so much you did good today or you messed up today or whatever, but it's really just a reminder of my growth continuum. So I'm
Yeah.
able to see, and and as I'm journaling, I'm able to see day after day those things that I am growing in, and have those things that I do need to have some accountability towards.
There you go. And that's perfect, like the way in which you're approaching it, because I always tell people this is not a referendum against yourself. It is truly about growth. And every day we're continuously learning more about ourselves. We're being curious with ourselves and we're continuously evolving. And it's not even about perfection. The book, it will never get you to a point of perfection. The book, as you say, is a guide that every day you can look as a reference point. Did I handle that well? Was I able to process through that emotion in this way to be able to say the things that I needed to say? If I created safety for myself? And one of the things that I love that you identified in the book is not about anybody else. If you
Right.
notice, it's about having a courageous conversation, but it is not about how you go into that conversation and you win the conversation by, focusing on the other person or making them, understanding more about them. It's about you.
Yeah.
Everything in that book is about how do I understand myself more in order to engage with another person in a much more effective and productive way. And so it's not about how you win something over somebody. It's about how you win those small things in our own personal lives that allow us to feel more understood and heard.
What do you find as commonalities as you talk to women? You're out there with your book, and you were recently on the Today Show. Congratulations! I got a
Thank
chance to
you.
catch that spot. So proud of you. I am
Thank
just like,
you.
sister proud for real.
Mhm.
But I wanted to know, what is it like to be out there talking about the book? What kind of feedback are you getting from readers?
I'm getting a lot of feedback in terms of just the a lot of people are realizing for the first time the importance of being able to use their voice in a more constructive way. A lot of people are realizing, a lot of the feedback that I get is that they're realizing how either they moved between I will wait until things just get so bad and then I blow up,
Right,
or I won't say anything at all.
right,
And so they're having this revelation of like, I don't necessarily know how to engage in, difficult discussions very well. And I think it's a revelation because I think as adults we want to feel that we can handle conflict. But in actuality, if we didn't grow up in a household where we saw healthy conflict happen,
right.
if we haven't had many opportunities to engage in healthy conflict, then as adults, we actually don't know how to. And many of us, unfortunately, have not had those levels of exposure. And so I think people wrestle with, wow, as an adult, I really would have thought that I was better at some of these conversations. And I
Mhm.
really am now realizing how much I haven't said or how I have possibly damaged some relationships because of how I've said things. And it gives them a new way to just kind of see how do you engage in conflict, but in a much healthier way. And so it's disarming the word. It's taking the negative connotation of conflict out and moving into a space that it's okay to have divergent opinions. It's okay to disagree. It's okay
Exactly.
to engage in conflict because that's when honestly we tap into creativity, innovation, and we learn more about each other.
Well, I will tell you that one of the things that I learned about myself going through this process of reading the book is I tend to shut down when someone that I'm in opposition to doesn't get it.
Yep.
I feel like I am telling you by the way I behave that this is what I need, this is what I want. And when I don't get that in return, it's like I can't be any better. I don't know how to be a better person. And it has nothing to do with that, because what I project is Sister Strong. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm Sister Strong. And then when someone, lets me down, I feel like then that's a wrap, because, I've shown you by my actions. And to your point, if someone that I'm in an altercation with or having some type of discrepancy around the subject with wasn't raised to process the information or my responses and my reactions the same way, then it is my responsibility to, as you say, lose the debate and have the conversation straightforward that says, this is what you did, this is how
Yep,
it made me feel.
yep, absolutely. And I think oftentimes there's a debate that the other person doesn't even know is happening.
Exactly. That's my point. That's my point.
It's
Because
an internal.
and if you're shutting down it,
Yeah.
basically you're at an impasse anyway.
Mhm.
I just learned so much about myself, which is why I love this book. Just
Me
a
too.
revelation of, at least giving the other person, partner, whichever, the grace to
Yep.
come to them and say, I'm not assuming that hurt was your intention, but this is how I felt.
There you go. That is probably one of the biggest parts of the book, that I highlight, the aspect of assuming positive intention. And the reason I think it's one that I highlight is because it was one that was so transformational for me. And so I always tell people when I write or when I facilitate or coach, a lot of the research is done, in the academic space, but a lot of it is done because of the work that I've done on my own self.
Right,
And so
right.
when it came to assuming positive intention, that was something that I really struggled with. And in the writing this book, like you said, we owe it to ourselves and to the other person to just at least give them grace and mercy and say maybe they didn't mean that way, or maybe I took it in a way that they didn't intend it, or maybe what they said made sense to them, right?
Hmm.
Or maybe they just didn't even have any awareness that this is what I was experiencing or feeling. And then once I started implementing that, like really in real life
Hmm.
years ago, my relationships changed. Not only did my relationships change, but how I looked at humans changed. And
Right.
so I have a much larger capacity for empathy because I tap into people and say, hey, I don't know if you were aware of this, or I just want to let you know this is how this made me feel. And I realize people don't oftentimes see the world the way we see it. And you know why? They weren't raised the way we were raised. They don't have the same experiences as us. And so as a result of that, your empathy increases and grows, and you understand almost, just how humans operate a little bit better.
I will say that as I am reading the book, I felt a need to hold myself more accountable. And I think that in all of our relationships, we get used to reacting to certain things, certain stimuli in a certain way. This book is something that I feel allowed me, especially like in a romantic relationship where I just think, it's not going to always be perfect. It's not, you're going to have some conflict or whatever. But instead of focusing so much on what the other person's intentions are, focusing on me being that person that I want to bring to the relationship. And that
Yeah.
takes some work. And
It's
that
a,
takes some self realization. And it takes some ouchy moments. It's like, I don't know, that hurt. But you can't grow unless you own that, right?
yeah. And it takes a lot of emotional regulation, especially
Yeah.
when we talk about those intimate relationships,
Yeah.
They push buttons that nobody else even has access to.
So
But
true.
yeah, but what you get an opportunity to do is say, in this relationship, am I able to show up in the best version of myself and create the safest space for myself and even for the other person? When I think back on past relationships when I didn't have these tools or I was less emotionally mature and regulated, and
Mm-hmm.
I just, explode and go into these tirades or, just, yell. I didn't get the results that I was looking for. Like, no, it didn't serve any purpose. Right?
Exactly.
It just didn't. And so I realized having conversations in a different way, but being clear about what it is that I'm feeling and what I need to say,
Yeah.
being emotionally regulated, it changes the actual tone of the relationship. It does. Now, I talk to this but I always have to give an asterisk. My asterisk is these tools and these techniques, they work the majority of the time. But I will
Mhm.
tell you, they do not work in situations where you may have someone who maybe have narcissistic traits and personalities.
That's
Um,
interesting.
And
And
so
why so?
because in those situations where you have an individual who has narcissistic traits and narcissistic personalities, it's usually difficult for them to empathize, to take the perspective of
Right.
another
I
person,
see that.
to
Yeah.
step outside of self.
Yeah.
And so, what these tools allow us to do is to really communicate from an authentic space. And another aspect of narcissistic personality, they don't always create that safe space. And so, when gaslighting is
Yeah.
introduced into the situation where someone is trying to make you believe that something else happens, it takes your even your frame of reference and your sense of reality out of the equation. And so the tools become very difficult to implement in those situations. And so I always give that asterisk to individuals that I always say, try it. And if you keep trying and you realize that you're not making any inroads with another person, you may want to look at it in a different way and say, what kind of person am I really engaging with? And be more curious in that aspect because the tools are for you to maintain your composure and to be as authentic as possible and to communicate as effectively as possible. But the other person also has to be open and receptive and hold a certain level of emotional maturity to receive that.
So this book isn't just for women. I actually have shared it with a couple of male friends, not to say, look, you need this, okay, because you're tripping, and I need you to understand how to, course correct.
Mhm.
But just again, if you're trying to grow, it's the
Yep.
perfect opportunity to share that desire to grow with others. But my question to you would be, how do the men that you've heard feedback from react to this book?
Now, just from the phrase of men and feedback, those two words don't often go together. But no, when I have had opportunities to speak to men who've read the book, I get amazing feedback from it. Of course, very different from that I get from the women. But they really talk about, there's a component of it where we talk about curiosity of self and creating a high level of
Yep.
self-awareness, understanding what your triggers are that may be impacting how you show up, right? And that's where they really say, you know what, I didn't realize that these things from my childhood or from my youth were causing me to show up in this way. I didn't realize that the way, my dad talked to me is the way in which I'm, kind of showing up in my relationships now. And so
Right.
it's that self-awareness in men that I noticed that is really, really kind of the high point for them. And that's the part that I love because like you said, when we go through this process of self-development in ourself and growth, to be able to do that in tandem with your partner is the
Yeah.
most beautiful thing that you can do.
Yeah.
And so I always tell people if you do it, get a copy for your spouse or your partner because, almost growing in isolation is challenging. You want to be able to do that and have real discussions and wrestle with the book and the different topics together and really understand each other through the journey.
Well, and the person that you're in the relationship with also needs to understand some of the growth that they're seeing in you is coming from the details that you're working through with the book. Um,
Absolutely.
when you made the decision to write this book, what was that process like? I know when we were working together, we were at, Fortune 50, corporation. Then you kind of pivoted into writing books. And I noticed that we did the same thing at the same time. COVID, the Rancho Stilettos is my COVID baby. Okay.
I know.
So I was,
And you inspired me. I watched you from afar and I was like, oh my goodness, she did it. Because we talked about it, right? And I
yeah,
watched you. I said she wrote it and she published it. And I was so proud of you. And I was like, if not now, then when?
yeah,
I mean, when the world shuts down for the first time in history, you see
exactly.
the moment, right?
Exactly. And I was thinking, I love to travel. I love being around people and creating joint efforts. When the world shut down, God was saying,
Yes.
I don't know what else I can do. Okay.
Right.
I've given you this window of time. And I felt like it was my responsibility to have something to show for it at the end of it. And we didn't even know how long the shutdown would
Right.
last. But
Right.
I got started. It started out with an outline and I've had the story, for a while. It
Yeah.
was just sitting and getting it done. Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
hardest part. It's the hardest part is to put the pen to paper and take it from the imagination into reality. But it was an underlying current of the way people were not able to connect with each other that I just thought was so necessary. Like I
Yeah,
think during that time it was so much, and even now, like it's even now the level of divisiveness that we are seeing,
yeah.
the stark differences that we have that we just don't seem to be able to come together on. For me, it was a passion project that I felt like the world needed. And in some ways, a lot of it I needed myself.
Well,
I needed
the topic of your book, though, I would assume took a lot of research as well.
Yeah, it took a
Yeah.
lot of research. Yeah, that's why I
And,
said a lot of it I needed to understand myself. A lot of research in the aspect of psychology,
mhm,
emotional intelligence, which is my focus of emphasis in research,
mhm.
as well as communication. And so those three components were the drivers and are the crux of the book. But I also wanted to pour in, a lot of my experiences, personal and professional as well.
Right.
So it's a little bit of me in there. I always give a good shout out to my grandmother and how, she raised me and the impact that has had on me in there as well. And so it's research and academic, but it's also grounded in a way that individuals can really connect with it.
And it's written in a way that you don't feel like you're in class. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's important for people to understand also. You have uh, feedback that you give, you've got your little anecdotes that you give, but it just makes it a fun read while you're actually growing and improving yourself.
Yeah.
Kudos to you, my girl. Kudos, kudos. I just
Oh,
love me some you. I'm so proud of you, girl.
ditto,
Oh my
ditto.
God, forever. Listen, we got to toast out on this one, okay? I love you. Thank you so much for joining the show. And
Thank you for having me.
we'll talk soon.
Absolutely.
Bye
Cheers.
bye. Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching the show. And please don't forget to subscribe and like. And remember, we may not always get the happy ending, but we make our endings happy.